Well, Sakura had lost her memories. Her and Nato had grown slightly closer. She had found that Nato just wanted to show up her brother, that impressed her mother, even though she knew her talent would never rival her brother. And the smell that had reminded her of the warm and sunny and they had behind the hospital. The sakura tree were in bloom in April years, where for some reason it was still warm. Nato and Sakura had eaten fresh cut fruits, chicken, and had exchanged gifts of perfume and chocolate. Simple, the gifts were basic, but still held meaning. Natsu had smiled at her before leaving to train, and because she was so busy, Sakura rarely saw her, unless passing her in the streets. The smell had held memories, the panics, and delectable fruits. The new relationship she had found for someone who was misunderstood, was confused, and now unrealized and accept love for Naruto was added to the memories. Oi Sakura, a voice rang in Sakura's mind as she opened her eyes and snapping out of her gaze. Yes, Naruto, she chuckled cheaply. Placing her own mud, you look like you had just saw an angel and they were coming to take you up there. Naruto laughed, pointing up at the ceiling, and Sakura giggled. After eating quietly, Sakura dug in her praise. Her taking this, Sakura smiled slightly, and her lipstick crossed the table. Sakura, I don't wear lipstick. Naruto sheeply smiled. Tried to hand it back to Sakura. Not so fast. Open it and flip it the switch in the bottom. Sakura smiled, watching Naruto intently as he followed the instructions Sakura had spoke. The cap popped off as the red cream pushed back in the stick, revealing a kunai. It was tipped with poison, and the bottom held a green liquid he assumed was an antidote. Thank you, Sakura. It means a lot. Naruto muttered, investigating the lipstick further. Trust me, if you look for bloodbath, you're gonna need it. Naruto pulled herself up to the seat bar as Sasuke continued to rip behind her. You're almost done, Sasuke spoke boredly, looking down at his watch. The metal bar continued to creak. The sweet sweat continued to roll down Natsu's face as she gritted her teeth and pulled up again. Her lunch and arms burned as she did two more. Last one. Sasuke glared and looking up at Nato, who had let out a sigh of relief. As she stepped down, she gotten better without Night Fox, right? Nato asked, curiously, hoping to hear what other people thought of her skills. Totally, Sasuke smirked. The Crimson Woman tapped her feet impatiently on the marble. Her red dress swished past her long legs as she caressed down the marble steps of her hidden place. She twirled the kunai in her hand as if it was second nature. She threw it and hit the several behind her, with a kunai in her heart. Damn spies, the woman muttered, angrily pushing open the door to her place. Let them in, she smiled. Let them all in, because it's going to be a bloodbath. Sorry for a long wait. A lot of stuff has happened on my mind. Thank you for continuing. Naruto paced up down the hallway. In the hospital, his mind felt like It was beginning to swirl into never ending spiral, and mysterious of all which were unsolvable by the police. Even the legendary Faku Uchiha was stumped by the death of Kakashi, and the support concealing didn't help with the disappearance of Bloodbath. His consoler listened, telling him it was going to be okay. But no matter how many times she did say it, he felt like Bloodbath was dead. The second she had left, the second she had disappeared, the second the void in his heart grew almost hollow from the love he lost, the love he yearned for, the love only she could give, the love that was impossible without her. Where are you when I need you the most? Bloodbath woke up in a daze, in a piece of cloth covering her eyes. The smell of chloroform into her nose slightly. She soon noticed she had been drugged and strangled against the chakra rope that behind her tightly disappeared set across her face. As she coughed up a little blood, she had been beaten up, make sure she was weak. The score suddenly apartment all over her body. Soon she heard a step high heels behind her, and she suddenly charged off the lights, turning on around her. She held back tears as the person grabbed her hair forcefully and ripped her clothes off, her eyes off. You're going to be very pretty versus all the other people I've killed. The woman smiled, exchanged, staring down at Bloodbath sarcastically. Who are you? Bloodbath pantically, the light still on too bright against her eyes to see the woman. She felt her breathing turn heavy, her heart beating like a drum, as she heard a scoff. Well, I'm your killer, your torturer, and your heartbreaker, and killer of your so-called Naruto Uzumaki. When he comes looking for you, the woman smirked as she grabbed the hammer from the set tools she had arranged on the table next to Bloodbath. Buddy, he won't come. We're nothing more than acquaintance, Bloodbath screamed as she tried to pray for her eyes open further. Her heart continued to drum as struggling to fight off the haze of drugs. Dream all you want to, boo. He's coming for you, the woman laughed as she strapped Bloodbath to the great table. The metal binds now destroy any chance of living for Bloodbath. And please keep fighting. The drugs, the less numb you are, the more fun for me. The woman growled and smiled, still spraying on her face. She then approached Bloodbath, her finger trailing off her cheeks. Her nail scraped as she continued to screech where she would cut first. Please, please don't be a coward and tell me who you're and damn bitch. Bloodbath screamed sadly, scoffed, almost escaping her mouth as anger boiled inside her. I'm your worst nightmare. The woman plunged her knife in Bloodbath's stomach as the crimson woman's smile grew. Enjoy it, sweetie. The woman smiled even wider. The spot of blood grew into the pile of blood. Bloodbath screamed in pain, shrieked, ringing desperately, praying for someone to save her. Already yelling, this is just the beginning, the crimson woman sang, instantly grabbing her hammer placed next to Bloodbath's knife. More screams were heard at the night. Naruto shook his head, He had been investigating the hospital for hours, searching for some kind of clue as were the whereabouts of Bloodbath. Nothing. Not a single clue. Not a single damn clue. Kakashi was still dead. Sakura was still in the hospital, and Bloodbath was gone, with no sign that would ever come back. The monster in the hospital who had killed all the nurses was proven to be an S-class enemy that even Naruto could not beat alone. Bloodbath hadn't stood a chance. Even he would to find a clue. How would he fight the monster? He could never win alone. The fact the monster could use Bloodbath's life against him. Well, many have been strong. Bloodbath meant everything to him. At the time, and her dying would send him spiraling down into sadness again, just like Kakashi's death had, but this time no one would be there to pick him up. He didn't trust any of the Ambu ever since Kakashi's death. For some reason, he refrained from closing them to take with him on the journey to save Bloodbath, even though the Ambu were obviously the best choice to picking up down the floor of Bloodbath's office. He grunted to escape from outside, almost jumping into his head. Of course, Naruto smiled as something clicked in his head. He soon raced and training field, almost jumping for joy as he saw Sasuke and Naruto. They were an old team and they had matured so much without him. He could tell already, but it all came down to whether they still accepted him. He didn't want to take a team who was ashamed of him. As a sensei, Oi, Sasuke, Naruto called out as the two of them stopped training and looked at him. Naruto gasped at the two. They had changed so much. Naruto had cut her long hair, pigtail, and short her hair, curly, ground her face. Her eyes now cold and her face more sharp. Her eyes were more defined and not filled with clueless wonder anymore. Sasuke had point chin and Oxness eyes were sharp. He seems to have unlocked his Sharingan as he stared at Naruto maniacally. So, how's your substitute, sensei? Naruto asked shapely as he rubbed his head. He's good. Naruto started before Sasuke cut her off. Not good enough, sensei. I need to get stronger. So why did you come here? Naruto was taken aback at the question as he said, well, I was wondering if you two were ready for an SSS mission. Naruto seemed shocked for a second before freaking out. She jumped and yelled as a scream. Is that even a question? Hell yeah. After screaming about 2 minutes, she hugged Naruto tightly. Thank you. Naruto smiled at his students proud of they had matured as she hugged Naruto and nodded at Sasuke, who was smiling thinly back at him. Alright, well, we fighting a level SSS, so get ready to Naruto yelled as he clapped his hands together. Naruto nodded. Salute at Naruto as Sasuke ran to a kunai training pole. Naruto then smiled, suddenly having hope that he find Bloodbath. He wasn't completely alone. The people had neglected him to train, had grown up, and they had believed in him, and they were there for him. Kurama, I don't know what happened or if you left me. I found people who love me. Naruto smiled as he gazed up to the sky. But don't worry about me. I found a team that appreciates me. Naruto grinned as he looked over at Naruto and Sasuke who were training hard. I still love in my heart and determination. And Bloodbath, Naruto smiled as he kissed his hands. I love you. He finished as he blew the kiss to the sky. Finished his talk as he jogged over to the training log. As he trained to stop to teach his students and telling them stories, pushing them just Kurama had done for him. As he continued to train, he felt as if Kurama was watching over him, telling him in his little innocence, I'm proud of you, kid. I'm proud. You've already surpassed me, and you will teach these kids to surpass you, and you will save your lover, and you will succeed, because you are Naruto Uzumaki, the only one who can. Finn. It was dark, pitch black, as the night outside of the room was freezing cold, and unwilling the young woman who lay on the metal table. It was slightly warm to her puddle of her blood, pulling around her body, which gave her a slight warmth. Her arm shivering as tired to lift them to her head, just wrapped a strand of blood-tied hair from her swollen face. Her nose bled as she laid her arms back down, realized she was still strapped to the table. She desperately reached for a kunai strap on the back, still groping for them helplessly in the dark. She's tied to be quiet, knowing she meet a very cruel punishment. If she made even a sound, her hand squeaked against the metal. As her eyes widened, she held back tears, quickly shoving her hand back into position. She had been strapped into ignore the bright light flickering on the second she had made a sound. The floor humming breathed as she heard a familiar swish of a red lace dress and clicking high heels that you could hear miles away. Now, what could you be doing me come all the way over here? The woman spoke coldly, her hands picking up an old wound a bloodbath had received the night before. Bloodbath remained silent, knowing if she let out a single tear or squeak, she'll be punished. Seeing that Bloodbath wasn't letting out a cry, the woman punched Bloodbath in the face to turn the ring, splitting her skin as she punched again and again and again until Bloodbath let out a scream of pain. Oh, sweetie, why would you scream? I guess I need to teach you a lesson. The woman laughed hesitantly, brandishing a small dagger in her hands. No, you'll see. Konoha will come for me. I know of their best ambu. Bloodbath screamed. The new-found anger boiled in her blood, although out of her body, as she kicked and yelled against the blinds. The woman smiled and disappeared off her face as she walked closely to Bloodbath, grabbing her hair and looked her dead in the eyes. Don't you dare think you're stronger than me for a second, little girl. I rule over you, and then I'll split her cheeks completely. Open the final hit, her demanding ring, and grabbed the knife off the tray next to her. Now on the window. Not to let out a hot puff of air as Sweet head down on her forehead, her eyes drawn to the end to track as Nightfox called time. They had just ran about 6 miles till Natsu looked like she was about to pass out. She crossed her eyes, freezing hair, sweet body, proof evidence enough that she was tired, Nato empty water bottle clanked against her legs as she head to the branch, still breathing heavily. Her hands moved up to her face, pushing her hair back as she plopped down on the bench. Sasuke followed, fumbling with his water bottle in his hands. He sat down gracefully, barely making a sound. Oxnay's eyes looked up at her, and he asked, "Would you like some water, Nato?" His voice as he followed like a river as Natsu nodded quickly. Sasuke handed her his bright blue water bottle, gazing in its sweet palm. Natsu quickly until she was satisfied, letting out a calm breath air. She smiled. "Thanks, Sasuke," she spoke, cheerfully voice replenished as the energy of Sasuke bones. It was if her very presence raised Sasuke's spirit. The bird chirped as the sun started to go down. The trees started to look sharper. "No problem," Sasuke muttered, a slight smile coming on his face as he took his water bottle back to Nato's sweetly hands. "So, Nato, do you want to go Ichiraku with me again?" Sasuke asked thinly, finishing off the remaining water left in the bottle. Sasuke and Nato had gone to Ichiraku after training numerous times and had gotten quite close. So this is normal, but Sasuke still asked for formally. It was just something he had raised with after catching her breath. Nato laughed. Is that even a question? Hell yeah. She cheered, her hands rubbing around Sasuke's back as she pointed to the road. "Let's follow to get to the famous ramen shop, to Ichiraku." Sasuke just smiled. Naruto packed up and watched his two students head off. It was extremely obvious they had gotten very close, maybe even romantically close, but wasn't going to assume it. After all, he respected their relationship, just as he had a relationship with Bloodbath. He sealed his training equipment in his scroll and unclipped the hot mask off. His face let out a wind wipe off the sweat beating down his face and cool the heat wafting off of him, smiling at his student's new attitude and improvement. He wanted from the beginning. He headed back to Bloodbath's office in the hospital, muttered a nightly prayer to God to give him a clue to find his lover, his other half, his one and only. Now filled with determination, he found himself jumping in the air, yelling so the world could hear. "I will find you, Bloodbath. Count on it." Nato popped down on the seat next to Sasuke, a small smile apartment on her face as she looked up to Ichi. "Ichi-san, can I have some pork and egg ramen?" Nato asked cheerfully, bunching on her seat and her place down to the menu. The old man nodded, writing down her order as a notepad. He looked over at Sasuke, who nodded curiously before saying, "May I have some tomato and fish ramen?" The old man nodded again, scribbling down his order. He headed to the back kitchen to make the order of Sasuke and Nato.